I think that we are at a crossroads when it comes to, well, I was going to say developing software, but really I mean developing anything, because everything has software in it nowadays. We have a choice to make, and that choice is to continue doing what has worked pretty well for the last 20 or so years, or to go back to the kind of chaos and lack of success that we were having at the end of the last century. I think it's very critical that we think about this and that we do something about it. Because if we don't, we're all going to suffer. And as a result, this is kind of my mission for the next year or two, is to try to talk about this and try to convince people that we actually do need to do something. So, who am I? I don't belong here. I'm not a manager. I don't have any TLAs to my name. I'm a software developer. I started programming back when that was state of the art. About 25 years ago, I guess, I wrote Pragmatic Programmer with Andy Hunt. And since then, we've done a new edition of that. And I guess you could say that I've introduced a number of technologies to the world that you may or may not be using, including Ruby and more recently Elixir, Ruby on Rails, this kind of thing. 23 years ago, I was one of the people that met in Snowbird, Utah, and we came up with the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. Just as a matter of interest, how many people here actually use some aspect of Agile in their work? Cool. Thank you very much. So let me just give a bit of history to underline where I think the problems are. Because I know a lot of people are going, what problems? Everything's working great. So let's talk a bit about how we got here. And I don't know how many of you were working in a business that involved software in the 1990s. If you were, you have my sympathy. It was a horrible time to be working with software. A consultancy called the Standish Group did a survey. In fact, they've done that survey every year. And they surveyed software projects. And they discovered in 1995 that 31, I think, % of software projects failed, out and out failed. We just threw them away. Does that mean that, was it 69% succeeded? No. 53% were considered partial successes. A partial success means it didn't actually meet its requirements, or it went way, way over budget, or time, or both. It was one of those kind of like death march projects that we had to finish, and we did, but it was not fun. So what does that leave? 16% of projects in 1995 were successful. I'm going to stop and think about that for a second. I've got a 50 million euro project that I want you to run. Can I pick on you, sir? Give me a number between 1 and 6. 6. Okay, so you're the project manager. $50 million or 50 million euros is riding on this, and you chose the number 6. Unfortunately, that's the joy of having someone else host my slides. They don't work. I just rolled a dice. And that dice said 5. Sorry, $50 million, 50 million euros, just gone. Why did we get into that trap? Why did we get to that state? We got to that state slowly over the previous 30 years because software started out really not that long ago. And we didn't know what we were doing then. We don't know what we're doing now. But we thought that software was a manufacturing process. We could do software the same way we built bridges. And so we fell into this trap of thinking that if only we could specify things better, if only we could manage them better, then we would write software better. So we fell into this kind of scientific management idea, the work of Frederick Taylor 100 years ago, who said that you can basically treat people as resources. I hate it when we talk about human resources. They're not. They are people. But Taylorism said, no, they're just resources. And if we motivate them right, and if we analyze their jobs correctly, they will do what we need. And as a result, we create these hierarchies. Hierarchies of authority and implicitly hierarchies of competence. We have managers and managers, et cetera, and that's how we manage software. And we had senior people who would be architects and project managers, and they would actually tell everybody else what to do. There was also this belief that software somehow was science. It was mathematics or something like that, because they didn't understand it. We don't understand it. It must be science. And there was just a hope, because every now and then a software project succeeded. And when it did, it was miraculous. It was like, wow, look what they can do with this bit of software. We want to do the same. So the solution that we came up with was to basically specify everything. Back then, if you wanted to do a software project, you'd start off with some kind of overall statement, then you do statement of requirements, and you probably do some kind of architecture diagram. You do functional requirements next, then you do some kind of architectural diagram, then you do some kind of more detailed requirements, and you do design, et cetera. And maybe in the last 7 minutes of the project, you'd actually do some programming. Also, the idea was that because people were resources, we just add more people to it, and it all works, which is ridiculous. Everybody knows it's ridiculous. Fred Brooks, in 1974, I think, in the Mythical Man Month, came up with this idea, or the entire title, the Mythical Man Month. We knew it was stupid, but we still just did it. And throughout the 1990s, things got worse. The more we managed it, the worse it got. Now, there was a group of people who were kind of playing around the edges of this, and who said, this doesn't seem right? Obviously, this isn't working. And so people like Kent Beck with his extreme programming, Alistair Coburn with Crystal, all of these kind of people were investigating how else we could organize software. And a group of us got together at a conference, and we were basically just having a beer and talking about how bad everything was. And we said, we should probably get together and talk about this more formally. And so we organized a trip. It was going to be to the Caribbean, and then we realized that our wives might not be that happy with us going to the Caribbean, so we went to a place called Snowbird in Utah instead. And we came up with this idea. And that was the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. This thing here took about a total of 5 hours. This was not one of these 3-month debate documents. We started off in the morning, sitting in a circle, talking about what we might be able to do, and by the end of lunch, we'd pretty much got that worked through. My contribution was the A over B formulation, which I'm quite proud of. In the manifesto, we do not say this is how you should do something. The manifesto is the values that we think are important. They're not rules, they're simply ways of thinking about stuff. So we value individuals over processes. Working software is way more important than having the documentation that describes it. Customer collaboration trumps contracts. Do we say you should never have a contract? Of course not. We're not stupid. But if you're going to have a contract, you need to be collaborating with your customer first, right? And most important, all respond to change is always, always more important than following a plan. Because, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the world is changing. Every second, every minute, every day, the world changes. A plan, there's been studies, a plan made today, if you have a detailed plan, a requirements document, whatever else, a year from now, over 25% of that is going to be wrong, just because the world has changed. And you don't know what this change will be. So if you're not responding to it, then you're guaranteed to be wrong, plan or no plan. Interestingly, and I hadn't really realized this until I started putting this together, if you look at the left and the right-hand side of that manifesto, the things that we value are things that are kind of organic, human, changeable. And the things that are less important to us are the more rigid, fixed things. And I think that's significant. So that is, to my mind, all you need to know about the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. If you know that, and if you live by that, then I think you can claim to be agile. And I think it seems to have worked. Because the Standish Group, as I said, they do this study every year, or maybe every 2 years. And if we look at the study from 2020, you'll see that the number of failed projects is about a third what it used to be. And the number of successful, that's totally successful projects, is up about 250, 300%. That's stunning when you think how much money we spend on software. How many trillions of euros, dollars, whatever, have we saved by getting better at developing software? Now, interestingly, this figure here is when they asked people what kind of, quote, methodology are you using? This is the number or the percentage when they asked people about that, and they said, we're doing Agile. For the people not doing Agile, it's a different story, but we'll get to that. But here's the problem. During that 20 years, we have mutated away from that set of 4 values. And it's really easy to see why. Back in, when was it, 2015, I think, maybe, 2015. I gave a talk in Amsterdam, which actually turned out to be my most watched talk, called Agile is Dead, in which I said that Agile has stopped being a set of values and has started being an industry. And as a result, it was no longer agile. And I'm not the only one. A quick Google will reveal any number of opinions of people claiming that Agile is dead, Agile's not working, whatever it might be. One of my definite claims to fame here is that I have been involved in something which appeared in Forbes magazine. So that's a kind of fame. If we look at the quotes, I've seen creative lights dimmed and inspired spirits dampened because people are forced to work within the confines of their organization's agile standards. A few new rituals are created and work goes on exactly as it does before, but now it's agile. I like this one. Beware SAFe, the scaled agile framework for enterprises, an unholy incarnation of darkness. It looks easy on paper, but not when you actually try it. What is modern agile? Fetishizing stand-ups, fetishizing pair programming, unit testing, Scrum fetishizes working, blah, 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 blah. And I think the most significant of all, this was no longer a methodology, it had become a religion. My screen is doing things for me. And my clicker is not working anymore. Clearly, we have an agile AV department. I don't know what to do, but I will carry on. So, what is the problem? Well, I think one of the obvious things is that people saw this incredible interest in agility. Thank you very much. Yay! The problem, I don't know why it says that. But agile is an adjective. Agile is not a thing. It is a way of doing things. And so it's not something you can buy. And all of these people that said, hey, look, we can jump on this bandwagon, we can make money by selling people consulting and books and everything else, guilty, about Agile, right? They jumped on this and started making Agile into a noun. But Agile is not a noun. It's not a thing. You can't go to your local market and say, I would like a pound or a kilo of Agile, please. You can't do that. It's not a product. It's not a thing. It's not a noun. Agile is not something. It's the way that you do something. As a very famous management consultant once said, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. So, quote, Agile is nothing more than a set of values. And a value is something that helps you decide. Do I do A? Do I do B? Well, what do my values tell me? So the values help you make the decisions. It is not the actual decision itself. By definition, anything that tells you what to do is not agile. It cannot be agile. If your organization has gone out and spent 2 million euros on SAFe, I'm sorry, but you were not sold anything agile. Because you can't be agile if what you do doesn't change. Why did it happen that way? Well, it's the same reason most things happen. It was just fear. Because doing agile the way it's supposed to be done is scary. It means that we have to make decisions as we go along. It means we have to start things and we don't always know how it's going to end. And we don't like that. We like yearly plans. Or if you're in the US, quarterly plans, right? Ridiculous things like that. So what do we do to fix it? I don't know. I know what you don't do. You do not fix this by adding new process. You don't fix this by putting another layer on top. You don't fix this using, well, I don't know, anything, KPIs, any other TLA, any of this kind of like old-fashioned management speak is not the way to fix Agile. By definition, it cannot be. Because the problem that you're fixing is that there is too much control in place. And you can't fix it by adding more. Sorry. Now, there is hope. I spent the beginning of this year on constant video calls with software teams around the world. And my question to them was, what is working and what is not working? And what I discovered was really interesting. I discovered that software teams, or the good software teams, had worked this out. And they had basically chosen to ignore their companies. They had chosen to run projects the way they felt was the right way to do it. And then somehow interface back into the existing management structure. And what they were doing was, to me, perfect demonstrations of agility. One of the best things I saw, then this was actually, I think 4 of the teams I talked to had invented this independently. Their software teams, their process, their company's process said that they had to have meetings, lots and lots of meetings. They were having Scrum meetings every day. They were having retrospective meetings. They were having planning meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And they added it up and worked out that in a 2-week period, they were using an entire person's worth of time in meetings. So they decided to stop doing meetings. And instead, they actually nominated a person to be the official communicator between the team members. And that person's job, this was a senior developer, was not to work on the software, but to work on the people working on the software. They acted as the team gossip. They talked to everybody. They found out what was going wrong. They found out what was going right. If someone was doing something that over here that someone else had already done over there, they would bring them together. If someone was having trouble, They would arrange for them to pair program with someone who knew about that particular area. And by doing that, they found their productivity went way up, their teams were happier, and they weren't spending all their time in meetings. This kind of thing is happening all over the planet as individual software teams work out that what they're being told to do is not going to work. But that's like the tip of the iceberg. Because think about what we can do if we start applying this more generally throughout an organization. If we can make organizations genuinely agile, I don't mean we're following some rule book. I mean we are committed to being genuinely agile. Which means that we have to give up control. Which means that we're no longer managing through dictate, instead we're collaborating. And I don't know, this is just some ideas, and I would love to talk to you about this. I think priority number one has always been communication. In the Taylorist hierarchical management system, that was a hierarchy. You went up and down the chain to get anything done. That doesn't work anymore. So we need to find ways of making communication more democratic, more network-based. One of the biggest software companies in the world I spoke to have a rule that anyone can contact anyone else. A junior developer can talk to the VP of something or other about a problem. And it works. Part of this is also transparency. Because you need to know, in order to be agile, in order to respond to whatever's going on, you need to know what's going on. So transparency is critical. Feedback. Feedback is the essence of agility. If you are a gazelle in Africa being chased by a lion, then your agility comes from all of the various stimulus that are occurring around you. Where's a good place to hide, right? Oh, I can't go that way because of that shrub. I'm going to go this way, whatever it might be, right? Feedback is vitally important. And feedback has a simple mechanism. You start off by saying, where do I want to be? I'm going to take the smallest possible step that I can take towards that. And then I'm going to say, am I better off now than I was before? That implies that you don't take a step until you know how to tell if you're better off or not. And that turns out to be a really critical planning move. Because if you don't know if you're better off or not, then why are you moving? Whatever happens, you then adjust and then you repeat. The critical thing is that you do this as a fractal. You do this at every single level, at every single decision you make, from the small to the big. The other thing about agility is that people need to know where they're going. And this, is where I get really close to being, conventional management speak. But it is really important to have a clear, shared vision, where every decision can use this vision to help guide the priorities. And this vision is not like a typical vision statement. This is more 3 ways we're going to change the world. Right? KPIs, OCR, whatever, these are not visions. A vision is a dream, something that you can inspire people with. Next, I hear a lot today about value. But what do we mean by value? A value is not a product. A value is not a deliverable. A value is what impact you have on the person you're delivering it to. In what way have you made their lives better? We're not delivering solutions. We're making our customers more successful. And if you're doing that in an agile manner, you're doing that every day. Successful companies in the software world are probably delivering their updates to their products multiple times every single day. And they're monitoring it. And if they screw up, they roll it back. Who cares? Last but not least, this is not something where you tick a box and then move on. This is a cultural change. This is something where everybody has to change, not just inside your company, but outside as well. Because this is such a great benefit to your company's customers. Because they get to control what you give them. They are part of the loop, and they want to be part of the loop. The same with your suppliers, the same with your community. The only way this works is if you gather context and use that context to make decisions. So maybe that would help. I don't know. The one thing I would say is there is a priority number 0 that supersedes all the rest of these. And that is trust. So much of what we do is based on not trusting people. And so we put in place all of these measures so we can make sure they do what we tell them to do. Stop doing that. Start trusting people. And yeah, every now and then, they'll screw up. So will you. Deal with it. If they screw up deliberately, fire them. If they screw up otherwise, help them. Trust your customers, trust your suppliers. Obviously, you're going to have contracts. And trust that your process will deliver goodness, even if you're not too sure exactly what that goodness will be. I have seen this time and time again. When people fall into this mode of doing things, good things just tend to happen. And you only have to trust yourself enough to let it happen. It's like that exercise where you fall back into the arms of other people. Trust is the basis of all of this. And then finally, just because you deserve to have a nice life, I always end my talks by saying, and you should make it fun. Thank you.
We do have time for a couple of questions.
Okay.
So whoever wants to, you can raise your hand.
Someone here?
We're using Scrum at our company, so what is your advice? Should we ask our developers not to join the daily stand-up or the meetings that you said, just that?
I'm sorry, could you start the first part again?
We're using Scrum at our company, so how should we proceed with the meetings? Because you said no meetings, but...
So I guess the question I'd have for you and your team and your company is, what value are you getting from your meetings? Why do you have meetings?
Communication.
Okay, communication. Everybody says communication. So if you think about the typical meeting, and maybe I'm just being cynical, a typical meeting is 2 people talking and 8 people looking at their phones. That's not communication. There's no communication taking place there. There's a passive-aggressive fight and then 8 bored people. Yeah? So if you want to have communication, have communication. Find ways of actually having people communicate with each other. A meeting is not a way of communicating. All right? Meetings are typically, I believe anyway, that meetings started out because it's how you did briefings. It's how in the military a commander told people this is what you're going to do. And I think in the business sense, a lot of meetings started out that way. That it would be the boss saying, okay, this week we're going to do this. And that was the meeting. And I think, well, we've fallen into the trap of thinking, well, meetings are good because the boss has them, we should have them. But unless they're actually delivering what you want them to deliver, then you should stop doing them and think of other ways to get the benefit. For example, this idea of the person that travels around through the group and acts as a kind of social lubricant works surprisingly well. No meetings, but people actually know what's going on far better than if they do a daily stand-up scrum or whatever it is they do. So I think with all of these things, with all of these practices, the key thing is to say, why do we do it? Is it delivering the value that we want? If so, good. If not, let's stop doing it. And I know that's like not always easy to do. But the trick, I think, is to come up with an alternative that sounds plausible and say, let's try it. Let's try it for a month or 2 months or however long you think it would take. Because the world is not going to end if you don't have a meeting for 2 months, as long as you've got some substitute in place. And at the end of 2 months, you say, okay, what happened? Was it better? Was it worse? All right, can we see issues where we didn't communicate that we would have done if we had meetings? Or, other way around, do we see things that were communicated better than when we had meetings? Yeah? Experiment. Be brave. It might work. One more.
So Dave, can you actually scale Agile beyond 50 people team? Because what you were mentioning is trust is needed, but if you have more than 50 people, you don't know them, the trust disappears, silos start to happen. And the more people you have, the more pressure for efficiency, repeatability, standardization. So can you really have a true Agile mindset in a team of 150 engineers?
Yes. Next question. No. So I think the interesting thing is that question implicitly has the seeds of its own destruction in it. Because clearly the answer is no, right? If you have 150 people all doing their own thing without some kind of supporting, I'm going to use the word framework, right? That's going to get a bit chaotic. But can those 150 people be agile? Of course they can. You talk about efficiency, I would argue that letting people work in smaller groups that all work towards a big picture is going to be way more efficient than sitting there and trying to micromanage 150 people through 6 layers of management. Now, can you do that? Yes, of course you can do that. Many companies do. It takes courage, because you are no longer sitting there with a big Gantt chart on the wall saying, this is how it's going to be for the next 6 months. Because you know what? It was never that way. Right? It's just, all that is a way of making you feel better in the morning until you get to the 6th month and you know we're close to where you're supposed to be. Right? So you can't do that anymore. But you can run small dedicated teams. And this is a controversial example of this, but I think it's not a bad one. The US Marine Corps have, if you've never read it, there is a freely available book that they publish called War Fighting, all one word. It's the doctrine of the United States Marine Corps. It is, without doubt, the best book on team management you will ever read. I guarantee it. And it is all about how to be agile. Because think about it. You are thrown into some war situation you've never been in before, and you somehow have to survive. You somehow have to make good in this. And so they are trained from day one to trust each other, to work in small, independent teams, 6 people typically. And they are trained how to rock and roll, how to adjust to a situation. They are never, ever told what to do. Their managers tell them what the objective is, and they go out and work out how to achieve it. I don't know how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Marines there are, but I know it's more than 150. And yet they manage to be ultimately agile. In fact, they're agile to the point that the Marine Corps strategy, when they hit the ground, the first thing they do is cause as much chaos as possible, because they know that they can deal with chaos better than the competition. So yeah, I think it is possible to be a big organization and still be agile, but you have to commit to it and shoot people every now and then. Okay? Again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.